الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدني علما رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we'll proceed today with our next section in our marriage course, in our marriage kitab. And today our topic is a hot one, the topic of Mahr, a topic that men don't usually like and women usually like, I think. But it's an important topic because it's one of the very important parts, the requisites, one of the integrals of the nikah itself. The marriage is incomplete without a mahr. We'll explore the opinions of the fuqaha and the madhahib as to, to the importance of the mahr itself, the amount of it, the time it becomes incumbent. Is it important that it's agreed upon beforehand, or is it something that they can agree upon later? There are a few different topics that inshallah. And then there's of course the instance of where if the mahr is completely not mentioned, and the marriage then proceeds, and the nikah is done, and the husband and wife get together, then what is to be done with the mahr if it wasn't mentioned? Whose haqq is the mahr? Is the mahr the property or a gift, specially and solely for the bride, or is it something for the family to go and have a sort of have a treat with, or is it just her property? She can decide what to do with it. All of that, inshallah, we'll try to understand. Quite simply, though, the mahr is the bride's property, the woman's property. She receives it privately and solely for her, and it's completely up to her what she does with this sadaq or this or this mahr. Let's begin. This is first of all, as always, we define what mahr is. Okay, mahr, first of all, lughatan, linguistically, it means what the gift that's given to a woman in marriage, a gift, an amount of gift, something that's given to the woman in marriage. As for the fuqaha and istilah and technically, there are a few ta'rifat. Generally, a part of that ta'rif is ma wajaba bi nikahin aw wati'in, that this is a mahr is a amount of dowry, amount of money, amount of gift, amount of property that becomes the right of the female spouse, i.e. the bride, because of aqdun nikah, the contract of marriage, or because of aqdun nikah. We'll stop up to there, inshallah. We'll keep it simple, but at the same time we'll try to go into some of the ikhtilafat when it's possible and when it's, inshallah, what is beneficial. So what's the dalil for it? Someone may ask, so I appreciate we should give mahr, but why? Why should I give mahr? Is there anything in the Quran and in the Sunnah that mahr is important? Of course there is. First of all, as we've said many a time before in our introduction to fiqh, that our Islamic rulings and guidance and our fiqh is based upon sources of evidences. And the first source of evidence is what? Quran. And the second source of evidence is what? Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The third source of evidence is what? Ijma' of ulama. Ijma' is in the consensus of scholars at any one time. If scholars unanimously agree upon a particular mas'ala, all of them at a particular time, okay, if scholars at a particular time agree on a particular mas'ala, a particular issue, then this in and of itself becomes evidence. The fact that they agreed upon it is strong enough evidence, though for them to agree upon, of course, needs also evidence behind it. Okay, what are they relying upon to make the ijma'? But their consensus is strong enough to become a form of evidence. What's the fourth type of dalil? Qiyas. Yes, qiyas, which is legal analysis or applying the ruling of a mas'ala from a prior time to a later time, to a later issue. So getting a ruling of a previous issue and apply. These are the sources. These are the four sources of evidence that's agreed upon between all of the four madhahib. Okay, these are adilla muttafaq alayha. Everyone agrees that these are sources of evidence. There are of course other types of also evidences like istihsan, like maslaha mursala, and etc., which are not agreed upon by all of the four schools of law. And so when we say what's the evidence, the first place to look for is Kalamullah. And so what's the source for Mahr in Kalamullah, in Kitab of Allah? Allah says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً, which is in Surah Nisa, ayah number 4. Allah says, and give women صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ, their mahr, their dowry, their gift, nihla, good amounts, a generous amount, a handsome amount, a good amount. Allah also says, فَمَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِيمَا تَرَاضَيْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الْفَرِيضَةِ, which is also Surah An-Nisa, but this time ayah number 24. That when you get into a marriage contract, when you take your marriage, when your marriage becomes sort of, when you go into a marriage contract, then you should give فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً, give them their amount, give them their money, give them their gift, give them their mahr, basically. As for the sunnah, the hadith is saying, ما روي عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من كشف خمار امرأة ونظر إليها وجب عليه الصداق دخل بها أو لم يدخل. This hadith is saying, the Prophet is narrated, the Prophet said that whomsoever opens the khimar and the scarf or the clothing, as in gets private, has a private you can say exchange with his wife after the marriage contract, then it is incumbent upon him to give her sadaq, i.e. if someone intends to be in a relationship with a woman whereby he and she will be able to be intimate and to be able to look at one another and etc., the marital rights and responsibilities, right? Then sadaq, the dowry becomes wajib upon him whether they consummate the marriage or not. So if you have, and this is one of the evidences, the Ahnaf and those who've followed and supported them, the Hanafi school of law, they say that if, say for example, someone does a nikah contract, okay, and then thereafter, when does that mahr become fard? As in, say for example, just straight after the contract, right, the marriage discontinues for some reason, whatever dispute happened, and before they could even have a moment together, the marriage discontinued. What happens? Does she still get the mahr or not? We'll come to that later on as well. Okay, suppose that was one case. Second case, the aqd was done, and then they had a moment of privacy together. They had an alone moment, they had a privacy moment, they had an intimate moment, but they never got the opportunity to consummate the marriage, i.e. intercourse. And so does their privacy and moment of privacy constitute, or is that enough for the mahr to be completely her right, for the sadaq, for the mahr to be her right, and that it must be given incomplete to her? These are all discussions we'll come to later on anyway. But the point being is the hadith is saying that whomsoever opens his bride's scarf or her khimar, i.e. her scarf, yes, then the mahr becomes wajib for her or for him to give to her, whether they have the opportunity to consummate the marriage or not. ثالثا الإجماع, so that was the sunnah, and there are also other hadith in that topic. Al-ijma', there is consensus of the scholars from the earliest of times, from the time of the Sahaba radwanullahi alayhim ajma'in up until now, that the mahr should be given to the woman. Now when we say, for example, what's the reason that something is wajib, we say these are the evidences, and these are the reasons. The evidences are the reasons. So this is the reason why we give mahr. Then we say, what are the wisdoms? Why is sharia? What are the benefits of mahr? And so the author and the alim and the scholar will try to say some evidences, some hikam. Nonetheless, the main reason for us giving mahr and for us doing anything in ibadah, for us doing anything that's required from us, is because Allah said it, or because the Prophet said it, or because the ijma' is there, because there is dalil to prove it. As for the hikam, these are benefits that may come. So from the benefits is that this is a gift to the bride, this is to make her happy, this is like, in exchange for her companionship, and all of the hikam that you can put in there in that chapter. Now that's that. Evidence is there are wisdoms there. We know that mahr is really important now because the evidence is there and the wisdoms are there also. Now, what is the legal status of mahr? Is it considered to be fard? Or is it something optional? Is it wajib? Or is it, say for example, mustahab? What are the fuqaha saying? ذهب الحنفية والمالكية أن المهر شرط لجواز النكاح فلا يصح العقد بدون ذكر المهر. That the Hanafi school of law and the Maliki school of law have agreed and have said that in order for the marriage contract to be valid, to be correct, there has to be a mahr detailed. There has to be a mahr involved. Without it, the contract will be incomplete. Though the integrals and the primary foundations of the contract in the Hanafi school of law is that ijab and qabul. The man proposes and the woman accepts, or the woman proposes indirectly or whatever, right? And the proposal and acceptance are the foundations of nikah. However, there are also conditions for those foundations to be then completed. And so the Hanafi school of law and the Maliki school of law are saying that mahr is a condition and part and parcel. It's a requisite of the marriage contract itself. Okay. ذهب الشافعية والحنابلة والزيدية. Okay, they have slightly different opinion. Okay, which says that it's mustahab for it to be mentioned. It's mustahab for it to be mentioned prior, but nonetheless, in the end, they will all say the mahr is required. We're differing on to should it be mentioned beforehand, should it be mentioned afterwards, if it's not mentioned, etc. But nonetheless, the opinion that's strong, that we go by, is that the mahr is a part and parcel of the nikah contract, and it should be mentioned beforehand, and it should be known clearly, stated clearly in black and white, in statement, and it should also be written down. Nowadays, write everything down, that this is the mahr that's owed to the bride, and she will receive it in this way. Either she's been paid already, or that it's been deferred. And when it's been deferred, it's usually good to have a time. If there isn't a time, then the deferred payment will be received by the bride upon the death of the husband or upon separation in marriage, if there was a divorce or something like that. Okay, but nonetheless, the mahr is a requisite, a part and parcel, an integral, a part and parcel, a shart, a condition from the conditions of the nikah. So what's the evidence for that then now? We've said that mahr is there, but where is the evidence to say this is a condition in the marriage itself? Allah says, وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ أَن تَبْتَغُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ مُحْصِنِينَ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ وَلَا مُتَّخِذِ أَخْدَانٍ Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 24. Allah is saying it has been permitted for you to seek for you spouses with your money, as in an exchange with your money, and as in the mahr is being mentioned, that this seeking of the spouse, the seeking of the bride is connected to giving her mahr and her dowry also, and so therefore it's a condition and it's a part and parcel of the nikah contract itself. As for the second opinion, which is saying that it is not necessary per se that it should be stated before the nikah, rather even if it's not stated before the nikah will still be done, they resort to the evidence where Allah says, لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة. There is no harm, there is no blame unto you if there is a divorce between you and your women, or if you divorce your women, ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة, as long as you have not been intimate with them, you have not touched them, or you have not stipulated for them a fariḍa, i.e. the mahr itself. Nonetheless, again, like I said, the stronger opinion, the opinion that we're going to go by, is that mahr should be mentioned, and that's what the Hanafis and the Malikis are saying very clearly, that the mahr should be mentioned, should be stipulated, is a condition of the nikah itself. Moving on swiftly, what's the amount of mahr now? Because this is where all of the beef happens, right? What's the amount of mahr? Because they will come in at 15, 20, some people 10, some people that we know. Khalas. And you know what? I had almost a shocking story the other day. A gentleman that we know, okay, he is, mashallah, he's slowly, he's got a job, he works here. He came from a different country and he's settled down here, and he's had this opportunity to get a proposal from a very wealthy family back home. I can't say any country names, can't disclose any information. And would you believe it? The mahr that the bride side were asking for was 200,000. No, not 200,000 like a foreign currency. 200,000 sterling pound. Like, bro, subhanallah, like, subhanallah, like, is she gonna give you a house to live in afterwards as well? Like, but no, this is just the amount. I was like, whoa. And then the gentleman, was polite. He said, I will give 20. but they weren't having it. So, but this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with sometimes. But look, Mahr, let's build an introduction. First of all, Mahr is Shari'i. If someone seeks a Mahr and stipulates a Mahr and demands a Mahr, they haven't done anything wrong. Okay? A woman can say, my Mahr is £100,000. By all means do so. If the man can't afford it, don't proceed. Maybe someone else will come and say, it's not a big deal. It's all right. It's, a couple of days of business turnovers, whatever, right? So a Mahr is the woman's choice. She can stipulate her Mahr as, when and how she wishes. Some women may say, I want my Mahr to be in Bitcoin. Or some will say, I want it to be in Ethereum. Or something like that. Or stocks and shares in a particular company. Allahu Alam. But the point being is, it's her choice. It's her choice. And she has that authority. In fact, at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, it came to a moment where women were demanding high Mahr. And so he wanted to set the Mahr to a low amount, to make it easy for men to get married. To make it easy for men to get married. And so he was challenged by a woman. A woman said, Ya Umar, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, how can you stipulate Mahr which Allah Himself has not stipulated? Allah said in the Quran, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلًا فَإِنْ آتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا. Nihla and qintar is just meaning vast and large amounts, generous amounts. So how are you, Umar, going to stipulate to a lower amount when Allah Himself didn't stipulate? So Mahr is valid. Mahr is a condition. Mahr is the woman's choice. She can choose to charge a particular amount. If you don't like it, don't proceed. Because if the woman's going to say to you, my Mahr is 50,000, then bro, realize that when she wants to buy her bags and her shoes, then you're going to also be struggling further. So it's best to stop at the beginning here, So Mahr is her choice to choose. Now, having said that, now is someone blameworthy for demanding high Mahr? For asking for a high Mahr, not necessarily. But then to enforce it upon someone who can't afford it, is blameworthy. How does enforcing work? For example, you've agreed. They say, for example, yes, let's get this boy and this girl, let's get them married. Alhamdulillah, it's all good, don't worry, everything will be fine. Yes, let's plan the date. Oh, let's buy the gifts. Oh, by the way, the Mahr is going to be £50,000. That's enforcing. That's not fair. That's pressuring. That's not fair at all. Do you see? But if from the outset they're saying, no, this is the Mahr. And that's because Allah has permitted it, right? Allah has permitted the Mahr to be a large amount. In fact, all of the other things that we spend money on, like say, for example, cars and halls and bridal makeup and the suits and the shirwani, all of that stuff. These are not requisites. Sharia is not telling us to spend this money. Sharia is not saying go and spend lots of money on shirwanis and bridal saris. It's not saying that. In fact, the only area where the Sharia is saying spend a lot is in Mahr, which is very interesting, because our Sharia generally is saying spend little, give to charity. Spend less, give to charity. But it's interesting that Allah, when it comes to Mahr, calls it charity. صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلًا. It's connected to sadaqah. And so giving Mahr in large amounts, if someone can afford it, is not blameworthy. And asking for large amounts to a person that can afford it is also not blameworthy. Where it's blameworthy is when you do dhulm, when you do oppression, when you pressure someone into doing it. For example, you will say, these two cousins are getting married and the Mahr has to be this much also. And there will be familial pressure and from the side and all this sort of direct or indirect. That's not permitted. So this is very, very important to set out from the beginning, that Mahr is something good. Giving it for the right intention, you will be rewarded for it. It's money spent, well spent. Rather, it's better spent money than your monies on your Lamborghinis and your halls and all this fancy Ponzi stuff that we do. Because this is an instruction from the Quran and from the Sunnah to give. As for the other stuff, it's not really instruction in the Quran and Sunnah. So when it comes to Mahr, I think there needs to be a bit of an adaptation on both sides. On the one side, the men should also, as in the grooms, should also, for example, if the woman says she wants X amount of Mahr, you can't afford it, just walk away. Just walk away. The world is a vast place. Inna ardullahi wasi'a. Plenty more fish in the sea. Like the man said in a song a long time ago. Right? I used to hear when I was young, when I was child, there was this one of the famous songs, plenty more fish in the sea. Dry your eyes, mate. So if you, not to compare anybody to fish or any other, that's not intended. But point being is, if you can't afford it, walk away. Don't put yourself in that situation. So the point being is, Mahr is permitted, Mahr is instructed, Mahr is from the Quran and Sunnah. But sisters, when it comes, if you do like a guy, and if you're interested in this guy, and you know that he's interested in you, don't pressure the person. If you know, for example, this Ahmed, okay, I like him, I've kind of indicated I want to get married to him. Then when you've kind of committed in that way, then make it easy. Find out what he can afford. Do you see? Don't like give them hopes and then try and trying to like force it out of them, because they can't afford it. And there is no barakah in that. When you pressure someone and oppress someone and emotionally like force someone, there's no barakah in that. And that's why the hadith says the most blessed of nikah are those which are the easiest in mahr. So on the one hand, there is instruction to like you can choose, but less is where the barakah is. Less is where the barakah is. Easiest of nikah, easiest of mahr is the most blessed. Look at the mahr that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu gave to who? The best of women. The queen of the women of Jannah, Fatima radiallahu anha wa ardaha. It's a very small amount. Very, very small amount. And yet, if there was someone who should be asking for £1 million or £1 billion mahr or a dinar mahr, should have been who? The daughter of the greatest man in the entire universe, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so it is that barakah that we seek. In that less amount, if the husband can truly afford it and gives it from the happiness of his heart. Why? Because he's got other plans also, right? I'm gonna get married, and this is just the beginning of the spending. If you're gonna try and suss it all out and suck it all out at the beginning, then he's gonna be indebted from the very first day. Now when he goes to a honeymoon, if there is one, yeah, because COVID now, so it's like honeymoons are very limited unless you go locally. If he's gonna go on honeymoon, he'll be like, do you know what? You've already got me in debt 15 grand. Love. You want me to spend more on you now? Come on, what do you think I am? Do you think I'm money grows on trees? These kind of things. Thoughts will come to his mind. You might okay, let's go and eat somewhere nice. And be like, you know what? It will be nice, but I really can't afford it. So yes, parents of the bride and the bride themselves, they should consider that I like this guy, he likes me. We're kind of in the marriage talks. Let's make it easy for one another. Just like you, the woman, should make it easy for her husband, the husband should also make it easy for his bride. Because you'll be surprised. Many men, they have these crazy requests. I think it's Hindu culture or something, where men demand, I need a car, you need to get me a brand new set of sofas, 10 grand worth, the furniture has to be tip top, fridge. It's like the guy's trying to get all the furniture that he couldn't afford in his whole life, trying to get it all packed into the marriage. It's like there's a mahr for the guy as well. This is jahala. There's no need for that. There is no shari'i requirement. You know this, in Bangla we say mal dawa. You have to give mal. Yeah. This is a cultural thing. It's nice. It's tahaddu tahabbu. Give gifts, you love one another. But as for, is it a condition from Sharia? No, it's not. No, it's not. Not at all. So just like the woman should take it easy, make it easy for the man, the men should also make it easy for the women. For their parents. And it's crazy sometimes you hear these stories, and this is quite common. I was reading something like a while back. There's something called I think what's it called? Dowry killings. Dowry killings. It's a really quite a big thing. Like people kill each other over dowries that weren't outstanding. And guess what? Dowries to the men. The men were promised. It's not. I don't think it's a Muslim faith or Muslims, but it's I think it's in India or part of this particular culture, whereby it's they force the woman's side to give the man a load of stuff, and the poor guy can't even afford even the basic marriage, like just the marriage cost, the wedding cost, let alone giving a motorcycle, giving a car, giving a home, giving a this and this. This is all. There's no requirement for that. Right, moving on now, okay? So I think this was a little, little discussion, and I think it's required for us to understand that mahr on the one hand, yes, it's praiseworthy, it's good, it's a part of the contract, okay? You have the right, yes, sister, yes, my brother, you can ask whatever amount you want for mahr for your daughter, it's your right, yes. But if someone says I can't afford it, just walk away. So khalas, you can't afford it, but that's fine, we'll find someone else. Don't kind of pressure them into saying, yes, we want you, but we want you to also give this amount that you can't afford. What's this about? This is oppression, this is wrong. And this is where the barakah goes away. Barakah physically, emotionally, spiritually, all the barakah goes away. Don't do that. Okay, now, we've said that the maximum amount of mahr, there's no limit for. It's literally as much as you can afford. as much as you can agree upon mutually without oppressing and harming anybody. What's the minimum amount then? What's the least amount of mahr? Is there a least amount of mahr? That's where there is some ikhtilaf between the fuqaha. The Hanafi school of law have said that the minimum amount of mahr should be 10 dirham, 10 darahim. 10 darahim. 10 darahim is about 31 grams of silver, which is very cheap. It's about like 20 pounds or something. Now, we're not saying to give that as mahr. We're saying that this is the bare minimum. There has to be some sort of material value that's given in mahr. The reason why that's important, even though it's such a small amount, you might think this is negligible, this is insignificant. But the point being is that in the Hanafi school of law, they maintain that mahr has to be something physical. You can't say to someone that, for example, I'll get married to you and in exchange I'll teach you the Quran. This is allowed under madhahib. Okay, but according to the Hanafi school of law, it has to be something of physical value, something that you can actually touch and feel, something that's hissy. And in that regard, even like cryptocurrency, for those who allow it, for the scholars, is something hissy in that regard, because it's actually a currency that you can actually use for various different things. Point being is that in the Hanafi school of law, the minimum amount is 10 dirham, okay, and in the Maliki, it's also they have a minimum amount, which they say is rubu' dinar min al-dhahab, a quarter of a golden dinar, or thalath darahim, or 3 dirhams of silver. The Shafi'i madhab is they have two opinions, similar to Hanafi, which is that it's 10 dirhams, and the other is saying that it's anything, any amount. There's no minimum amount. It's like anything you can afford to give, even if it's something not physical, even if it's something like intangible, like for example, in exchange for teaching the Quran, as the hadith says, that you have been married to her in exchange for what you have with you in terms of Quran. And so this is the evidence that they go by. The mahr can be anything, even if it's not something tangible, if it's intangible, as long as you give something to your woman, to your bride. And also in the Quran, Allah says in Surah Al-Qasas, إِنِّي أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُنْكِحَكَ إِحْدَى ابْنَتَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ عَلَىٰ أَنْ تَأْجُرَنِي ثَمَانِيَ حِجَجٍ, that the father of the 2 women that Sayyidina Musa met when he went to Madian. You know, there was 2 women that he met, and he helped them with the water and stuff, and then eventually he was invited to their home, and then the father of the 2 women, one of them said, I want you to marry to one of my daughters. And he said that the mahr will be that you have to serve me, or serve my for 8 years or 10 years, like you have to help me with my farming, whatever work. And so that goes to show that it can be something intangible, it's a service that's provided. That could be also a type of mahr, according to the Shafi'i school of law, and also similarly according to the Hanbali school of law. Okay, and then, right. The evidence that the Shafi'is have gone by is the ayah that I've said, إِنِّي أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُنْكِحَكَ إِحْدَى ابْنَتَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ. That's one of them. Also, that the Prophet ﷺ said that the أَعْظَمُ النِّسَاءِ بَرَكَةً أَيْسَرُهُنَّ مُؤْنَةً, that the most blessed of women and most barakah, filled with barakah women are those who have the easiest and the most affordable mahr for their in marriage. Also the Prophet said that iltamis walau khataman min hadid. He told one of the Sahaba that look for a mahr for her, even if it's a ring made out of metal. And perhaps that's where the whole concept of exchange of rings and stuff comes from. Khatam and dibla and etc. All of this stuff comes from the cultures. Mind you, the rings is not a part of any contract. It's part of cultural thing. If someone wants to go and practice it, no problem. Not doing it also has no harm. Some people think, it's like a Western culture, right? If you've taken your ring off, it's like, whoa. It's like you've said no to marriage all of a sudden. But I've been married for, I think it's 9 years coming up to. Last time I made a mistake, I got in trouble for that. But my ring, I lost it. I got in trouble at that time. But for now, it's okay, inshallah. But I'm married, alhamdulillah. So, not wearing the ring is not necessarily an indication that you're not happy with your marriage or you don't want to be married. These are things, it's like cultural things, in agreement, And so I think in challenge, my wife also took her diamond ring off that I gave, and now she's wearing a different one. So yeah, if you can take it off, I can take it off too. It's fine, do whatever you want, it's not a problem. But this whole cultural stuff is not an integral part of the nikah Islamically itself. Rather, it's if something is a gesture, right? Now we've kind of indicated before, we've said the minimum amount, 10 dirhams. And that in that discussion we've also spoke about what can technically be a mahr. According to Hanafi school of law, the mahr can only be a mal, a property, an asset that's mutaqawwam, that's shar'i mal. So you can't give in mahr, for example, alcohol, because that's not shar'i mal. Or dead, something that's dead meat or something. You can't. It's common sense, but it's in law you have to stipulate and clarify these things. So it has to be shar'i mal, what's considered to be mal according to the Sharia, according to Islam. Okay. The Maliki school of law says that anything that can be an exchange, that you can use it for an exchange, can also be a mahr as well. The Shafi'iyya and the Shafi'i school of law said that whatever can be sold or can be an exchange or can be a benefit of some sort, whether it's a benefit now or benefit later, this is all something that's acceptable or deemed acceptable as mahr. The Hanbali school of law similarly saying that the mahr can be something that's a price, a particular amount, or a particular amount of time of service, like the story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, whether it's now, whether it's later, whether it's immediate, or whether it's deferred, this is all permitted. So generally speaking, mahr, you can indeed give all of it now, before the nikah, or at the time of the nikah, or you can give all of it later, as long as it's agreed upon. You can give some of it now and some of it later, as long as it's all agreed upon. At a time of, say for example, mistrust and untrustworthiness, perhaps it's better to give all of it in one go. But again, Sharia does not say that you must give it all in one go. You can indeed give some of it now and some of it later, or all of it later, as long as this is stipulated. The main thing is there's an agreement. And when it comes to deferring, there has to be also a specification. So you can't say, I'll give you something later. What do you mean you'll give me something later? What kind of mahr is that? You have to specify how much you're going to give and roughly when you're going to give it as well. So there's no jahala fahisha, there's no like a unacceptable amount of ignorance or a lack of clarity in what you're specifying as mahr. Now, so we've said mahr is shari'i, what's the evidence for it? What's the minimum amount? What can mahr be technically? What are the different? Can you give mahr? Is it only always physical property, or does it have to be? It could be some sort of a benefit, a service. According to the Hanafi school of law, it has to be something physical. Mahr has to be something physical, currency, property, whether it's gold, whether it's a diamond ring, whether it's a money amount, whether it's a currency of some sort. All of that is permitted, but it has to be something that's mal mutaqawwam, shar'i mal, shar'i wealth, shar'i property, asset, and etc. When does this mahr now? Suppose now you agree upon it. You're in the marriage talks and you're discussing. You see, the mahr will be this much. When does it now actually become the property of the woman? Is it when you agree upon it, or at the time of the nikah, or after the nikah? When does it become her property? So it says, اتفق الفقهاء على وجوب المهر للزوجة بمجرد العقد. All of the fuqaha have agreed that as soon as she says, I've accepted this guy, and you've said, I've accepted her, then she is eligible for the mahr. She is eligible for the mahr. As for if there is a divorce before privacy, before consummation, there are different masail that come in later. But as for technically, when does she become the owner of her mahr, is when she says, I have accepted, I have agreed. Because you will say in the marriage proceedings and contract, you say, this marriage is between this guy and this woman with this amount of mahr. He will say, I have accepted, and she will say, I have accepted. So you've accepted, you've agreed, so therefore the property is hers, because you've agreed in front of your witnesses that this is what you're going to do, so therefore the mahr is now hers. If there are exceptional circumstances afterwards, that will come in later on. But that's when she becomes the owner of her mahr, as soon as she agrees. So that means, if she says that I will not move in with the guy until he's paid my mahr, she has the right to do so. I will not consummate the marriage until he has paid my mahr. If she says that, that's her condition, then she has the right to do so. I will not travel with him until he has paid all of my mahr, then that's her right to also do so. But that's her, she has to stipulate that. Do you see? If she says no, okay, maybe you can give it later on, but then, no, actually I want it right now. You can't change. What you agree upon, okay, that you have to, what you agree upon is what you basically go by. If you agree that it's going to be given advance or right now, then she has a right to withhold and not give his marital rights to him and not fulfill her marital responsibilities until she gets her right. Because that's what you agreed upon, mate. Okay, so he quotes a few different texts. He says, مواهب الجليل في شرح مختصر الخليل, which is one of the Maliki's texts. المرأة تملك الصداق بالعقد. It says that the woman owns the sadaq and the mahr just with the contract. As soon as the contract's done, she owns it. المهذب للشيرازي, which is one of the Shafi'i texts, says وتملك المرأة المسمى بالعقد إن كان صحيحا, that the woman owns the amount of mahr that you stipulate with just the aqd. Whether she consummates the marriage afterwards or not is irrelevant. You've agreed to this, and so therefore you must give this mahr. Okay, and then he says وجاء في كشاف القناع في متن عن متن الإقناع, which is a Hanbali text, says وتملك زوجة الصداق المسمى بالعقد حالا كان أو مؤجلا, whether it's now or later, whether it's immediate or paid later, she will become the owner of the mahr that you've stipulated, agree upon just by the aqd. Muhalla li Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, which is one of the Zahiri scholars and one of the greatest texts in the Zahiri madhab, if you like, is basically also saying the same thing. And بدائع الصنايع في ترتيب الشرائع لإمام الكاساني, which is a Hanafi text, is also saying المهر في النكاح الصحيح يجب بالعقد سواء كان المهر مفروضا في العقد أو لم يكن. With the contract itself, the mahr becomes her property. Okay, so this is agreed upon by the fuqaha, between the fuqaha. And so because it's her property, like we've said, she has a right to ask for it, she has a right to demand for it. She can even say that until you pay all of it, if that's what you agreed upon, I will not conform to marital responsibilities and rights. Then that's also her authority to do so. Okay. So we'll said all of this now. Okay. Now, we've said that she becomes the owner technically of the mahr with the contract itself. Okay? Okay? Now, if the contract thereafter breaks before the consummation of the marriage, or previously and etc., the rules may differ, the rules may change. Say for example, if the woman passes away, okay, straight after the marriage contract, unfortunate events, then would she receive the full amount of mahr or would she not? This is a discussion to have. If, say for example, there was a divorce straight after the contract, would she receive all of the mahr or half of the mahr? Is also in the Quran and is also in the Sunnah. Okay, so meaning the mahr becomes her property with the contract, but it will become her right after. It will become her right. If, say for example, if there's a breakage, if there's a discontinuation of marriage, then the mahr can change, can differ. However, if the marriage proceeds as normal, where they have their privacy or they have the intimacy, then this is the title of the title of the chapter is Al-Umur allati yathbutu biha al-mahru li-zawjati. When or with which actions or which scenarios, okay, make the wife eligible for the entirety of the mahr, the complete mahr that you agreed upon. Okay, so if, say for example, there was an ending of marriage straight after the contract, or she passed away straight after the contract, then scenario could be different. But then if after the contract certain other things happen, she will become the owner of the complete amount of mahr without no reduction whatsoever. What are these things? What are the scenarios in which she will become the owner of the complete amount of mahr? First of all, it's something natural anyway, which is that consummation of marriage. If there is consummation of marriage, then she will become the owner of the complete property of her aqdun nikah, or of her mahr. Similarly, al-khalwa, which is a moment of privacy alone. This is what the Hanafis have maintained, that al-khalwa as-sahihatu yajibu biha al-mahr kamilan. That if there is a moment of complete privacy between the man and the woman, and that's taken from, remember I said to you at the beginning of the lesson, if someone opens the scarf of his bride, then he has a moment of privacy, then with that the mahr is established, or it becomes the complete mahr becomes her right. The complete mahr becomes her right. I.e., if before that there was a breakage in the marriage, the scenario would be different. It would be half the mahr. It will be half the mahr. But because now this particular action has now completed the agreement as well as the marital life, she becomes the owner of the complete total amount of mahr, and that's either with consummation or complete privacy, i.e. there's nobody else with you. If there are other people in the hall, then that's not really complete privacy. However, if it's a separate room completely where you had a moment to spend with your wife completely alone, then this is something that according to the Hanafi school of law would be considered khalwa sahiha, and so therefore the complete mahr would become her property altogether. As for the Shafi'i school of law, they've said that, you know what, according to the most recent opinion, or the newer fil jadid, and in Shafi'i school of law we have a Shafi'i fil qadim wa fil jadid, and that's referring to Imam Shafi'i's fiqh when he was in Baghdad and when he was in Misr, because he was traveling different parts of the world, and his madhab sort of evolved over time. You know, his madhab when he was in Mecca, his opinions were some in a particular way, and then when he was under the tutelage of Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, it was in a particular way, and then in Baghdad it was in a particular way, and then eventually when he became mustaqir and settled in Egypt and he finalized his madhab, his madhahib were considered to be, you know, that's when it became the ultimatum, the final, the jadid, you know, the new opinion, even though it's a long time ago now, but jadid refers to around that kind of time. And so there are differences within the Shafi'i school of law, and that's a separate topic anyway. Okay, but they are saying that just by a moment of privacy, the mahr does not become wajib. Rather, consummation would be required for that. Consummation would be required for that, and they have the evidence there to prove that point. But nonetheless, the point being is that the woman technically becomes the owner of the mahr with the aqd itself. Thereafter, if there's a breakage before consummation or before khalwa, privacy or consummation, then the mahr could change. But if the consummation or the privacy take place, and she is now completely entitled to the full amount of her mahr with no exceptions whatsoever. With no exceptions whatsoever. I hope I'm not making any severe contradictions or any confusions here. If there are any, then you can inshallah ask me afterwards as well. Okay, and there are some conditions as to how this khalwa could be. Okay, now what are some of the things which can hinder and stop from the mahr becoming established, or mahr becoming the right of the woman? أما الموانع التي تمنع من sorry, not the mahr. What are some of the mawani', some of the things which can hinder a moment of acceptable and complete privacy? What can constitute a situation where basically we're going to say that this wasn't actually khalwa, i.e. they never had a complete moment of intimacy or privacy? Okay, there are certain things that can hinder it. For example, it could be a natural thing, or it could be something that could be like even if it's not a physical scenario, it could be like a hissi, like a scenario which isn't physical, but it's the moment. We'll understand from the examples as well, inshallah, the moment which did not allow for it. Or it could be shari'i. So what are some of the examples? Okay, we say, for example, tabi'i, a natural reason why a khalwa or privacy may be impossible is that they were not able to see one another. Because he did not see her, he was unable to see her, he became blinded or something like that, or etc. Or hissi and haqiq would be that all of a sudden, hissi is something that's sort of not physical but something to do with like sort of internal. One of the two spouses fell ill, and so they could not actually have that moment of privacy. As for shari'i, okay, or that for example they had an illness or they had a physical defect whereby they were not able to complete that moment of privacy or even consummate the marriage. And then there could be shari'i, like for example one of them was fasting in Ramadan, or they were fasting in Ramadan, so they could not actually have that moment of privacy or consummate the marriage. And so these are some of the things which can prevent someone from having, establishing. These are just sort of possible scenarios. Okay. Now, what happens, right, if one of the two, if the woman, what happens? Yes, what happens if one of the two spouses, they pass away after a marriage contract? Okay, we hope so, that this is, any time near to the marriage contract. So if someone passes away, then what's known is that the mahr that's owed to her, if there is any outstanding, should be paid immediately. The mahr, because this topic is about mahr, so it's like mahr, everything, even the maut topic is about mahr. So the mahr that's owed to her, if the man passes away, then from his estate, one of the things is his debts, and from his debts is the fact that he owes his woman X amount. Or if she passes away, then she is also to be given her mahr as well. that was remaining, and that would be given because there's a change of ownership. That would be her become a part of her estate that then becomes divided apart among her family and among her, children and etc. So with maut, the mahr becomes immediate even if it was delayed previously. Next lesson, inshallah, we'll speak a bit more about mahr, but this time it's going to be mahr al-mithil. So I'm called mahr al-mithil. Mahr al-mithil, just to introduce it, is basically when there wasn't an agreement onto the mahr amount. They couldn't agree that this is the mahr, and they have a dispute, whatever, and they could not agree upon the mahr. And so therefore, Sharia has a default way of specifying what the mahr is. This is called mahr al-mithil, whereby the mahr is to be similar, the mahr, the dowry the woman receives, is to be similar to her sisters or her aunts, based on what's a normal mahr for their family or for a woman of her standing in society and etc. This is only when mahr is not actually specified, because if she does specify, she has a right to specify any amount, regardless of whether she's educated or a businesswoman or otherwise. It's completely up to her. But if it was not specified, and then they say, well, mahr wasn't specified, and the man would say, or the groom would say, okay, then I will pay mahr al-mithil. I will, based upon her situation, her standing, or other women sort of, in her family, what kind of mahr did they receive, what are they used to, what's trending basically, I will give that mahr to her. We'll talk about a bit more inshallah on that topic bi'idhn azza wa jal. And then after the mahr, really, we kind of speed up our journey in the chapter of in the chapters of marriage. We'll talk about mahr when it can be not applicable. When does mahr, when it's not given? Can it be a situation where mahr is not given, that it's not a right anymore? Okay, and then we'll talk about after mahr is basically going to marriage life. We're going to marriage life, rights and responsibilities. If there are children, suckling of the children, who provides, who feeds, breastfeeding and etc. Or what are the rules and regulations with regards to that, and then we come to, after that, the possible scenario of divorce. So inshallah, maybe a couple more lessons, and then we'll be finishing the chapter of marriage, and then we'll be talking about divorce itself, inshallah. For now, we'll end it here. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Bismillah.
Well, it's a question regarding one of the past chapters.
Okay.
So, regarding when the male goes to meet the female to see her
Mm-hmm.
for the first time. For example, if a woman believes that when the niqab is mandatory, covering the face, but then she also follows the view that when she unveils herself, she unveils more than just the face and the hands. For example, what she shows to like her father and mother, and a brother, sorry. So at that time, when the potential groom gets to see her, is it only him, or can the other males from his family, for example?
No, only him.
Only the male.
Only him, because this is an exception. And in fiqh, we know exceptions are calculated based on the exception only. So his exception because he's looking to get married to her. As for everyone else, it's none of your business technically.
Because usually when you go, your family.
Yeah, I know that. This is a good. It's a very good question, because usually when they go, Hajj Khalil, our Bangladesh tradition is, I don't know if it's the same, everyone has to look. The dulabais, the brothers. Oh, look, the bride. What's this like? It's not your bride. Yes, understand the women should go and look, of course, by all means, that's, for them is permitted. But as for the man that's been given the exception, then only he should be taken by her brothers or one of her wali to say, go and meet her, have a moment of privacy, talk to her, whatever. This should be. So for those who are perhaps planning these kind of events in the near future, they can also make sure that it's only them that they see right in that. But yeah, it's a good question. Okay, and niqab, like you said, niqab, for in that scenario, the Sharia has allowed for her to unveil herself, to show her face, to show her hands, to show her, hands, feet, face. These are permitted according to, I think, the Hanbali school of law we covered before. It's more than that. What's normally apparent in her, from her, among her family, is also permitted to see. And there are also other opinions in that topic. But yeah, it's only for the groom himself who's seriously considering marrying her. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. We'll end it here. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah. Inshallah, we will continue next week. Subhanakallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.